38 places. That's the gap in the rankings between these two teams. One of them has won this tournament twice. One of them hasn't won a World Cup knockout match in regulation time since 1986. One of them has the most dangerous forward on the planet wearing the captain's armband. One of them scored its first ever goal in a World Cup knockout game 4 days ago. On paper, this shouldn't even be a conversation. France against Paraguay in the round of 16 should be a formality. A warm-up, a gentle stroll for Les Bleus on their way to bigger things. Except 4 days ago, everyone said the same thing about Germany. And Germany is on a plane home. In this video, we're going to answer one question. Can Paraguay actually beat France at the World Cup? Not in theory, not in a video game. In real life, on July 4th, at Lincoln Financial Field in Philadelphia with a quarter-final on the line. We're going to break down exactly how this Paraguay team dismantled one of the giants of world football. We're going to look at the terrifying machine Didier Deschamps has built for his final tournament. We're going to revisit two of the most painful nights in Paraguayan football history, both of them delivered by France. And we're going to lay out the precise blueprint, step by step, that gives this team of fighters from Asuncion a genuine, legitimate chance of pulling off what would be the second biggest upset in World Cup knockout history. Because here's the thing nobody wants to say out loud. Paraguay isn't here by accident, and France has a weakness. A very specific, very exploitable weakness that this exact type of opponent has punished before. But before we get to that, you need to understand what happened in Boston on June 29th. Because that's the only way any of this makes sense. Gillette Stadium, Foxborough, Massachusetts. Round of 32, Germany against Paraguay. Four-time world champions against a team playing its first World Cup knockout match in 16 years. The bookmakers had it as a mismatch. The pundits had it as a mismatch. Julian Nagelsmann's Germany had just won Group E and looked like a side finally rediscovering its tournament DNA. And then, in the first half, Julio Enciso rose to meet a cross and headed Paraguay in front. Stop and think about what that goal actually meant. Paraguay had played knockout football at the World Cup before. Against England in 1986, against France in 1998, against Germany in 2002, against Japan and then Spain in 2010. And in all of those matches, across all of those decades, they had never scored a single goal. Not one. Enciso's header wasn't just an opener. It was the first knockout stage goal in the entire history of Paraguayan World Cup football. 96 years of waiting, ended by a 22-year-old with a leap and a flick of the neck. Germany responded, because Germany always responds. Kai Havertz flicked home a Florian Wirtz cross to make it 1 apiece. The game ground into extra time, and that's when the football gods decided to twist the knife. Jonathan Tah rose and headed what looked like a winning goal for Germany. The German bench erupted, and then VAR intervened. The goal was controversially ruled out, and the match crawled toward the first penalty shootout of the entire tournament. Now, penalty shootouts are supposed to be lotteries. Coin flips. But this one told you everything about the two teams. Paraguay missed 2 penalties of their own. 2 chances to seal it, gone. A team with fragile nerves collapses right there. Paraguay didn't blink. Meanwhile, Havertz missed. Tah missed. Nick Woltemade missed. 3 German players, 3 failures, and goalkeeper Orlando Gil, standing in the Boston night like a wall that had been waiting 16 years for this exact moment. The statistic that should terrify France is this one. Paraguay had 25% of the possession in that match. 25%. And they still created just as many dangerous chances as Germany did. They didn't survive Germany. They out-executed Germany while barely touching the ball. Jurgen Klopp, watching his countrymen crash out, admitted afterward that Germany 100% had to change a few things. The rest of the football world was asking a different question. Who exactly are these guys? To answer that, you have to go back 16 years. Because the story of this Paraguay team isn't a fairy tale. It's a resurrection. The last time Paraguay played at a World Cup in South Africa in 2010, they produced the greatest campaign in their history. They ground their way out of the group, beat Japan on penalties in the round of 16, and then pushed the eventual champions Spain to the absolute limit in the quarterfinals before falling 1-0. That team had legends, that team had belief, and then that team disappeared. Brazil, 2014. Didn't qualify. A World Cup on their own continent, and Paraguay watched it on television. Russia, 2018. Didn't qualify. Qatar, 2022. Didn't qualify. 3 consecutive tournaments. 12 years of failure. An entire generation of Paraguayan kids grew up never once seeing their country at a World Cup. Coaches came and went. Ramon Diaz, Eduardo Berizzo, Guillermo Barros Schelotto, Daniel Garnero. Nothing worked. And when qualifying began for 2026, it looked like more of the same. 3 matches, 1 point, rock bottom. The campaign was dying before it had even started. Then, in August 2024, the federation made a phone call to an Argentine coach named Gustavo Alfaro. And everything changed. Alfaro is 63 years old. Across South America, they call him the Professor. He spent 3 decades managing in Argentina, won the Clausura and the Copa Sudamericana with unfashionable Arsenal de Sarandi, sat in the hot seat at Boca Juniors, and then reinvented himself as an international specialist. He took Ecuador to the 2022 World Cup, where they beat the host Qatar in the opening match. He had a spell with Costa Rica, and when he arrived in Asunción, he inherited a squad that was talented, chaotic, and completely broken. What he did next borders on the miraculous. Alfaro stripped everything back. A compact 4-4-2, 2 disciplined banks of 4. Quick, vicious transitions. No ego, no improvisation, no nonsense. And the results came like a flood. Paraguay beat Brazil 1-0 in Asunción, with Diego Gomez scoring the winner. They beat the reigning world champions Argentina 2-1. Goals from Antonio Sanabria and Omar Alderete. They beat Uruguay too. For the first time in their history, Paraguay defeated all 3 South American giants at home in a single qualifying cycle. The numbers behind that run tell you exactly what kind of monster Alfaro built. 10 goals conceded in 18 qualifiers. 10. In the most hostile qualifying confederation on earth, against Messi and Vinicius and Darwin Núñez, Paraguay conceded barely 1 goal every 2 games. They only scored 14 themselves, and Alfaro couldn't care less. He wasn't building a highlight reel, he was building a trap, and they climbed from dead last to 6th place, the final automatic qualification spot, and booked their ticket to North America. Then the group stage tested every ounce of that resilience. The opener was a nightmare. The United States, at home, in Los Angeles, riding a wave of host nation hysteria. 7 minutes in, Damian Bobadilla stuck out a leg and turned the ball into his own net. Folarin Balogun scored twice. It finished 4-1, and every expert on the planet wrote Paraguay's obituary. What happened next is the reason France should be nervous. 6 days later, against Turkey in Santa Clara, Paraguay needed a response. They got one in 64 seconds. Andres Cubas ripped the ball away, fed Julio Enciso, and Enciso released Matias Galarza, whose low left-footed strike from distance flew through Marie Demiral's legs and into the corner. 64 seconds, the fastest goal of the entire tournament. And then came the moment that should have destroyed them. In first-half stoppage time, Miguel Almirón was shown a straight red card. He became the first player in history sent off under FIFA's new rule prohibiting players from covering their mouths during confrontations. A brand new law, and Paraguay's most experienced attacker became its first victim. 10 men, 45 minutes to survive. 1 goal lead. Turkey threw everything at them. 32 shots. Read that again. 32 shots in a single match, breaking a record that had stood since Portugal's 2006 quarterfinal. Hakan Calhanoglu volleyed wide. Can Uzun was denied twice, once by a brilliant Orlando Gil, save in the 89th minute. Mert Muldur smacked a header off the bar and the post. Demiral headed inches wide in stoppage time. wave after wave after wave, and the score at the final whistle read Turkey 0, Paraguay 1. 32 shots. 0 goals. That's not luck. That is a defensive organism functioning at a level most national teams can only dream about. A goalless draw against Australia in the final group game did the rest. 4 points, third place in Group D, and passage to the knockout rounds as one of the 8 best third-place teams. It wasn't pretty. It was never going to be pretty. But Paraguay had clawed their way back from the dead, again, and then they buried Germany. Which brings us to the small matter of what's waiting for them in Philadelphia. Before we get there, one more thing about this Paraguay squad, because the names matter. Enciso, just 22, now at Strasbourg, is the one genuine spark of South American flair in a team of soldiers. Almirón, 32, the former Newcastle fan favorite now at Atlanta United, is the creative heartbeat and the pressing trigger. Diego Gomez of Brighton is the box-to-box engine who scored that famous winner against Brazil. And Sanabria, the man who punished Argentina, leads the line. It's not a galaxy of stars. It's something arguably more dangerous in knockout football. A unit where every man knows his job to the centimeter. Because France, right now, might be the most frightening team in world football. Didier Deschamps is coaching his final tournament. 14 years in charge of Les Bleus. A World Cup as a player in 1998. A World Cup as a manager in 2018. A final in 2022 that slipped away on penalties in one of the greatest matches ever played. He is one of only 3 men in history, alongside Mario Zagallo and Franz Beckenbauer, to win this trophy as both a player and a coach. And he has announced that when France's 2026 campaign ends, so does his reign. Every player in that squad knows they are playing for the last dance of a legend. That kind of emotional fuel is dangerous, and the squad he's brought to North America is absurd. Start with the captain. Kylian Mbappé is 27 years old, playing his 3rd World Cup, and he is having the tournament of his life. 2 goals against Senegal, 2 against Iraq in the same match where he won his 100th cap, then 2 more against Sweden in the round of 32. 6 goals in 4 games. Along the way, he overtook Olivier Giroud to become France's all-time leading scorer. And his career World Cup goal tally has now surged past Miroslav Klose's long-standing record of 16. Think about that. The all-time record for goals scored at World Cups, a record that survived Ronaldo, Messi, and Pelé, now belongs to a man who is still nowhere near his decline. And Paraguay has to stop him on Saturday. But here's the truly cruel part. Mbappé might not even be the most in-form attacker on his own team. Ousmane Dembélé arrived at this tournament as the reigning Ballon d'Or winner, fresh off leading Paris Saint-Germain to the Champions League. Against Norway in the final group game, he scored a hat-trick. In the first half. Alongside him, Michael Olise has been the quiet assassin of the entire tournament, racking up 5 assists already, including the pass that sent Mbappé through for the opener against Sweden. Behind them, the depth is nauseating. Bradley Barcola, who scored against Sweden. Desire Du, Rayon Cherki, Marcus Thuram. Deschamps has so much talent that he left Eduardo Camavinga, a Champions League winner at Real Madrid, at home entirely. The results have been ruthless. 3-1 against Senegal, 3-0 against Iraq, 4-1 against Norway, a match Deschamps missed to attend his mother's funeral in France, and his team responded by producing their most dominant performance of the group. Then 3-0 against Sweden in the round of 32, a game so comfortable it looked like a training session. 4 matches, 13 goals scored, 3 conceded. A perfect record. France isn't just winning games, France is sending messages. So that's the mountain. A team stacked with Champions League winners, led by the most lethal forward alive, coached by a legend chasing a 3rd star in his farewell tournament, riding a perfect record and a 13-goal avalanche. And if history has anything to say about it, Paraguay should be terrified. Because France has met Paraguay at the World Cup twice before, and both meetings ended in Paraguayan heartbreak. The first was in 1958 in Sweden, and it started as a dream. Paraguay went toe-to-toe with the French in a group stage shootout and actually led 3-2. For a while, one of the great upsets of the era was alive and breathing. Then France woke up. The floodgates opened, just Fontaine and his teammates poured forward, and by the final whistle, the scoreboard read France 7, Paraguay 3. 7 goals. It remains one of the most brutal collapses in Paraguayan football history. A warning carved into the record books about what happens when you poke this particular bear and fail to finish it off. The second meeting was worse, because the second meeting was closer. France, 1998, the round of 16. The host nation against a Paraguay side built around one of the most extraordinary characters the sport has ever produced, goalkeeper José Luis Chilavert. For 90 minutes, Paraguay's defense, marshaled by Carlos Gamarra and Celso Ayala, repelled everything France could invent. 90 minutes became 100. 100 became 110. The match was crawling toward a penalty shootout, and with Chilavert in goal, a man who scored penalties for fun at club level, Paraguay would have fancied their chances against anyone. Then, in the 114th minute, the ball fell to Laurent Blanc inside the box. A defender. He swung his boot, the net rippled, and the match simply ended. Golden goal. The first golden goal in World Cup history. No chance to respond. No shootout. Just sudden death in the most literal sense, and 11 Paraguayan players collapsing to the turf in Lens while France marched on to lift the trophy on home soil. Gamarra, Ayala, and Chilavert were all named to the tournament's all-star team. It didn't matter. The wound never fully closed. Paraguay has never beaten France in the entire history of their national team. And now, 28 years after Blanc's golden dagger, the two nations meet in the knockout rounds again. So with all of that stacked against them, why should anyone believe Paraguay can actually win this match? Here's why. And pay attention, because the blueprint is more realistic than you think. Reason number 1. France's attack is historic, but the profile of team that troubles them hasn't changed in years. Deschamps' France is a transition monster. Give them space, and Mbappé, Dembélé, and Olise will tear you into confetti. Norway gave them space and conceded 4. Sweden gave them space and conceded 3. But teams that surrender possession entirely sit in 2 compact low banks, and force France to break down a parked defense have historically dragged Les Bleus into ugly, nervous, low-scoring grinds. At the last World Cup, a Tunisia side with a fraction of France's talent beat them 1-0 by doing exactly that. At Euro 2024, France reached the semi-finals while barely scoring a goal from open play, because opponents stopped giving them room to run. France's superpower has never been patiently unlocking a bunker, and a bunker is the only thing Paraguay knows how to build. Look at the evidence from this very tournament. Paraguay held a Turkey side that generated 32 shots to 0 goals with 10 men. They held Australia to nothing. They gave Germany 25% possession and matched them chance for chance. Every single match, the same shape, the same discipline, the same refusal to break. Gustavo Gomez, the captain, with nearly 90 caps, organizing everything. Omar Alderete, now battle-hardened by the Premier League, next to him. Andres Cubas snapping into tackles in front of them. This is not a team that will be pulled apart by pretty passing patterns. Someone will have to produce something genuinely special to score against them. Reason number 2. Paraguay carries 0 pressure, and France carries all of it. Nobody on this planet expects Paraguay to win on Saturday. Their tournament is already a triumph. They've matched a generation's worth of expectations just by reaching this round. France, meanwhile, is playing a farewell tournament for their manager, his favorites, against a team ranked 38 places below them. One match after Germany's elimination showed every giant in this bracket exactly what happens when you sleepwalk against a South American street fighter. If this match is goalless at the hour mark, The anxiety in the French ranks will be real, and anxious favorites make mistakes. Reason number 3, the set piece and the shootout. Alfaro's Paraguay doesn't need 30 chances. They need one. A corner. A free kick swung toward Gustavo Gomez or Alderete, both of them ruthless in the air. A single transition where Enciso finds Galarza in space, the way he did after 64 seconds against Turkey. Paraguay has scored exactly 3 goals in this entire tournament, and those 3 goals have been worth a win over Turkey, a draw-clinching platform against Germany, and a place in the last 16. They are the most efficient team left in the competition. And if they can drag France all the way to penalties, everything changes. Orlando Gil has already won 1 World Cup shootout. France, for all their brilliance, lost the 2022 final from the spot. In a shootout, the 38-place gap evaporates completely. Reason number 4. It's already happened once. Germany was ranked 10th in the world. Paraguay was ranked 41st. That 31-place gap made Boston the 4th biggest upset in the history of the World Cup knockout rounds. The players in that Paraguayan dressing room no longer wonder whether they can slay a European giant. They know they can. They have the scalp hanging on the wall. Belief is the single most underrated force in tournament football, and right now Paraguay has more of it than at any moment since 2010. Now for the other side of the ledger. Because honesty matters, and the case for France is brutal. Start with the most obvious problem. Germany is not France. Germany arrived at this tournament as a wounded giant, a team that hadn't escaped the group stage at either of the previous 2 World Cups, dragging a decade of trauma behind them. When Enciso scored, the doubt crept in immediately, because doubt has lived inside German football since 2018. France has no such scar tissue. This is a team that has reached the final of 2 of the last 3 World Cups, winning 1 of them. When France concedes first, they don't panic. They've come from behind on the biggest stages in the sport. The psychological fragility that Paraguay exploited in Boston simply does not exist in this French squad. Then there's the Mbappé problem, which deserves its own category of concern. Paraguay's entire defensive structure is built on compactness between the lines. But compactness doesn't stop a runner like Mbappé, because Mbappé doesn't attack the space between the lines. He attacks the space behind them. Even the deepest defensive block has to step out eventually, on a goal kick, on a clearance, on a corner. And the moment Paraguay's backline is even 2 yards higher than it wants to be, one ball over the top from Olise or Dembélé turns into a foot race that no defender in the Paraguayan squad can win. Tunisia parked the bus against France in 2022 and won, yes. But Mbappé barely played that match. He will play every minute of this one. There's also the fatigue mathematics, and they are cruel. Paraguay played 120 minutes plus a penalty shootout in Boston on June 29th. France strolled through 90 comfortable minutes against Sweden on June 30th, with Deschamps able to manage legs throughout. The round of 16 kicks off on July 4th, in the heat of a Philadelphia summer afternoon. Paraguay's game is built on relentless collective running, on every player sprinting to close every gap for the full match. That engine has already been pushed into the red once this week. If this match goes deep and Paraguay needs it to go deep, the extra day of rest and the shallower workload could decide everything in the final 20 minutes, exactly when Deschamps starts unloading fresh superstars off his bench. And finally, there's the depth gap, which might be the biggest mismatch of all. If Paraguay loses Enciso, their creativity is cut in half. If they lose Gustavo Gomez, their organization wobbles. France can lose anyone, literally anyone, and replace him with a Champions League winner. Over 90 minutes, that might not matter. Over 120, it almost always does. So how does the match actually unfold? Let's play it out. Alfaro will set up exactly the way he always does, because changing now would be madness. The 4-4-2 drops into a 6-3-1 out of possession. Cubas sits in front of the back 4 like a guard dog. Enciso and Almirón, back from his suspension saga, wait for turnovers and sprint into the channels. Paraguay will happily concede 70% of the ball, invite France onto them, and gamble everything on set pieces and 2 or 3 counterattacking moments per half. Gil will need to be spectacular, and the good news for Paraguay is that he has been spectacular for 3 consecutive matches. France will do what France does. Olise and Dembélé hugging the touchlines to stretch the block as wide as possible. Mbappé drifting off the last shoulder, waiting. Patient circulation, then sudden violence. Deschamps is far too experienced to chase the game early. He will trust his talent to produce one moment before the hour, and if it hasn't come by then, Doué, Cherki, Barcola, and Thuram start warming up. The first goal decides the entire script of this match. If France scores early, Paraguay's greatest weapon, the slow suffocation of hope, is neutralized before it can begin, because now Paraguay has to come out and attack the best transition team on earth. That path ends 7-3, the 1958 way. But if Paraguay is still alive at halftime, every minute afterward compounds the pressure on France like interest on a debt. The crowd tightens. The passes get half a beat slower. The memory of Germany creeps into French minds, whether they admit it or not. And if it reaches the 80th minute at 0-0, Paraguay is no longer the underdog in the stadium. They're the trap that's about to snap shut. So can Paraguay actually beat France? Here's the honest verdict. If these teams played 10 times, France wins 7, maybe 8. The talent gap is real, the fatigue gap is real, and the Mbappé problem has no clean solution. By the rankings, a Paraguay victory would be the second biggest upset in the history of the World Cup knockout stage. Second, of all time. That is the true scale of what we're discussing, but they don't play 10 times, they play once. On the 4th of July in Philadelphia, the city where the most famous underdog declaration in history was signed. And in that single match, Paraguay holds a very specific kind of hand. A defense that has conceded 1 goal from open play in its last 3 matches. A goalkeeper in the form of his life. A coach who has spent 40 years mastering exactly one art, the art of making superior opponents miserable. A squad with the freshest possible memory of slaying a giant. And an opponent whose only reliable weakness, for nearly a decade now, has been precisely the kind of match Paraguay forces every opponent to play. Paraguay doesn't need to be better than France. Paraguay needs France to be human for one afternoon. Germany was human. Argentina was human in Asunción. Brazil was human in Asunción. This team has spent 2 years turning the humanity of giants into results. And there's one more thing. One detail that should keep French fans up at night. In 1998, France needed 114 minutes and the first golden goal in World Cup history to put this nation away. That Paraguay team had less talent than this one, less momentum than this one, and a nation that had at least seen a World Cup within living memory. This Paraguay team is playing for every kid who grew up during 12 years of darkness, for a country that waited 16 years just to hear its anthem at this tournament again, and for a coach who resurrected them from a single point in 3 matches to the last 16 of the world. Desperation like that doesn't show up in the FIFA rankings. The realistic answer is that France wins this match, probably by 2 goals, and marches on toward the collision course everyone expects. But the honest answer, the one the numbers whisper underneath the noise, is that this is the single most dangerous opponent France could have drawn in this round. Not the most talented, the most dangerous. Because Paraguay has already proven, on this exact stage, in this exact tournament, that the impossible takes them about 120 minutes and 5 penalties. France should win. France will probably win. But if you see Paraguay still standing at the hour mark, still compact, still snarling, with Lincoln Financial Field growing quieter and quieter, do not look away. Because you might be watching the second biggest upset in World Cup history assemble itself in real time.